Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first session of Swords of the Serpentine. My name is Mike. My pronouns are he, him. I'll be the GM of this game. We are running this through the Open Hearth online gaming community. Um, a little bit about myself. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a long time. Started in the early 80s. I played a lot of D&D in the 80s. I played a lot of GURPS in the 90s. Played a lot of D&D third edition in the aughts. And that transitioned to Pathfinder until I kind of felt like I was getting buried by the weight, both figuratively and literally, of like every of the Pathfinder hardcover books. And that's when I, couldn't take being the forever GM anymore. Canceled that group, took a month off, and then fell into a bunch of people playing a little hippie indie game called Dungeon World. And after that, I kind of dove in headfirst into the deep end of the story game pool. That's, and that's mostly where I've been playing. I joined the Open Hearth Gaming's precursor organization when it was called the Gauntlet Online Gaming Community back in 2018, and I've been my involvement with the community is kind of like waxed and waned. It's kind of like waned the past couple of years. One of the things I want to do this year is kind of get back into Open Hearth. So this is the first multi-session series I've run for Open Hearth in a couple of years now, and I'm really looking forward to it. Um, Yeah, that's enough about me. Let's go around the table. Let's go clockwise in order of the gallery view on my screen here. So let's go to Brandon.
Hey there, I'm Brandon, he, him. Um, gosh, I first encountered story games back decades ago with My Life with Master, and then with Dogs in the Vineyard and Apocalypse World and everything else. And that only expanded enormously when I joined the Open Hearth back around 2018 or so. Um, I um, I've only played I've played a couple of gumshoe games. I've played Swords of the Serpentine, and I've played a horror gumshoe that Shane ran, and that's been my experience. I love Swords and Sorcery, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, or low fantasy stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, this game is there are others as well, but this game really does a good job of like bringing home the, kind of like the Fritz Leiber or Robert Lynn Asprin or like Conan the Barbarian sword and sorcery stuff. So we'll get into that once we get into the game a bit more. So cool. Glad to have you aboard, Brandon. Adam, would you please say hello?
Sure, I'm Adam, pronouns he, him, and I've been playing games since the early '80s and jamming them almost immediately, and so I've covered the full gamut. I have very eclectic tastes where it comes to games and game design. I'm a bit of a collector of systems. I run a lot at local regional conventions, so I have a great love of sort of putting together very prop heavy experiences. Um, but my tastes, I think I lean toward intrigue, mystery. I can count 5 foot squares with the best of them and optimize a character, but that's not where I mostly enjoy spending my time. I've played Gumshoe a number of times. I believe I played Swords of the Serpentine with Kevin Culp when it was released, and I have a copy of the game, but haven't gotten a chance to get to the table, so I'm excited for this opportunity. And I've been in the last year or so spending more time trying to play games online in Discord, and Open Hearth is one of several communities that I enjoy, and I've played a handful of games thus far. I'm looking forward to this one.
Cool. Welcome aboard. Elliot, would you please say hello?
Hi, Eliot, pronouns he, him. I've been on Open Hearth for a couple years now, played a variety of games here, and overall been playing games for, I don't know, a number of years, number of decades. With respect to Gumshoe, I ran the big campaign for Fall of Delta Green, the Borellis connection for my home group. That's the only Gumshoe system I've played. I own the Swords and Serpentine book, as I do many other books that remain unplayed on my shelf.
I think many of us have a very large shelf of shame. don't call it shelf of shame. Call it the shelf of abs aspiration. I have, but yeah, I definitely have. Looking at my game shelves, I think I've probably only played about. I think I've probably only played maybe about a quarter of the games whose books are on my shelf. Anyway, cool. Glad to have you. And Vyrrk, would you please say hello?
Hello, I am Vyrrk. My real name is Christos, and I have been playing games for about a decade, almost exactly, actually. So I'm still fairly new to the hobby, which is a weird thing to say after a decade, but here we are. Um, and I don't get to play very often, so I'm normally always the GM for my friends and more other online community groups that I'm part of. But so playing's kind of a thing for me. So good luck. Here I am. And this is my very first open hearth game. I had signed up for being on the gaunt when it was the gauntlet kind of thing at some point, and I started looking into it, and I heard some horror stories, and I was like, you know what? Never mind. I'll come back. And so I'm back.
Cool. Yeah. Glad to have you. Yeah, in addition to Open Hearth, I'm involved with a few other online gaming communities. Probably the one that I'm most involved with is the Happy Jacks RPG Network, which is actually where I met Vyrrk. Um, been hanging out there more than here the past couple of years, but I'm trying to like not lessen my presence there, but increase my presence here. Anyway, so welcome aboard. So, Swords of the Serpentine. Um, let's let's talk a little bit about. Let me just kind of give the high level elevator pitch of Swords of the Serpentine. So I'm going to do a little discussion called CATS. CAT stands for concept, aim, tone, and subject matter. It's kind of a little story game ritual just to make sure that we're all here to play the same game. So the concept, Swords of the Serpentine is an action-packed sword and sorcery RPG. The PCs are adventurers in the fantasy city of Eversink. Eversink is loosely based on the fantasy cities of Lankmar and Sanctuary, and also Renaissance Venice, because it is a city. It is Eversink is it's a city of canals. It's very this the game is very much tied with the city, so the city almost becomes it's a cliche to say, but the city almost becomes a character in and of itself. Um, the game is directly inspired by classic works of sword and sorcery, like the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser series, Red Sonja, Conan, the Elric saga, and the Thieves World series. That was that shared world anthology from the late '70s, edited by Robert Asprin. So that's the concept. Stepping out of cats for just a sec. I played in So I've been playing Swords of the Serpent. I kind of got into the ground floor with Swords of the Serpentine. I started playing it in 2018 when it was still like one of the early beta play tests. The GM of my home group was a personal friend of Kevin Culp, the co-author, and agreed to run the intro scenario, and then we'd go back. We had so much fun with it that we continued to play the game for the next year and a half. Weren't intending it to be a long time campaign, but we just loved the game so much we just kept going. Anyway, I've run Swords of the Serpentine as a one shot, or as like a 3 session short series a couple of times in the intervening years. This is the first time since those playtest days that I've run a longer series. I'm anticipating we're probably going with 8 sessions. I'm guessing we're probably going to tell like 2 stories. Probably gonna have 2 adventures. And in the tradition of fantasy sword and sorcery short stories, they won't necessarily be connected. Anyway, I'm sorry, I stepped out of cats here. Going back to it, the aim of Swords of the Serpentine, well, the aim of this endeavor entirely is we're going to tell a compelling story of sword and sorcery, action, adventure, and intrigue. Where the PCs will ultimately, get in over their heads, win a ton of riches, and then between sessions, blow it all so that they're going to be starting from scratch again. Again, kind of like how Conan can end one session with mountains of gold and living the high life, and in the start of the next session, he wakes up face down in an alley. Tone of this game. This is a swashbuckling action adventure game with weird magic and feats of daring do. There may be some dramatic or horror elements, but we'll mostly be keeping things kind of fast and breezy. Subject matter. So this may vary by adventure, but typical themes include or typical things that we may want to talk about. Games will probably include murder, gore, undeath, monsters, corpses, demons, fantasy religion, corrupt officials, and dark magic. That is cats. Any questions? One thing I do want to talk a little bit about is gameplay. So this is based on the GUMSHOE system. So your characters are going to have your characters don't have stats at all, but you do have two sets of kinds of abilities. You have investigative abilities, which you'll basically use to like know stuff, and general abilities, which you generally use to do stuff. And we kind of have two different kinds of scenes. We've got like investigative scenes and action scenes. Sometimes they'll bleed into each other, sometimes they won't. You'd mostly be using investigative abilities and investigation scenes and general abilities and action scenes, although not necessarily all the time, and one can immediately lead right into the other. The game does have a fair amount of math. You're gonna have points that you're regularly spending and refreshing. And the game uses six-sided dice. The resolution is basically you've got a target number, you roll a d6, you say how many points of the ability you want to spend, you roll a d6, you add the number the number of points you spent versus a target number, which I will tell you before you roll. That's kind of gameplay in a nutshell. Okay, that's the cats discussion. So the next thing I want to talk about is emotional safety at the game table. We're a bunch of strangers or near strangers are getting together to play a game over the internet, and the purpose of this little endeavor is to have fun. At the same time, each of us is bringing a different set of life experiences to this table, and a subject that might be perfectly fine for you to want to play with in a game setting, I might not want to play with. So in order to sort of like, take those sort of things into account and to focus on the fun, we're going to be playing with a set of nested safety tools that'll allow us to focus on the fun and, avoid the things we know to avoid, and also have some tools at our disposal that we can, correct things if we brought the game into a place that one of us didn't necessarily want to bring it. So the first and most basic of these safety tools is called the open door policy. That means we are all free to come and go from this game as we see fit. Anyone can call a break at any time. Anyone can step away from this game for any reason. Come on back when you're ready. And we are all empowered to say that, you know what? I've concluded that this game isn't really for me. There's more math here, or this is more trad than I thought it was. I'm not I'm going to step away and, I'm going to peace out of this game. And the rest of us, the reaction to that will be cool. Sorry, this game wasn't to your liking. I hope we can play something that's more up your alley in the future. If you do step away and you're not planning to come back, I would appreciate if you let us know that you're not planning to come back, so we don't wait for you too long. But otherwise, if your cat knocks over a vase and you need to clean up the water, or like your landline rings and it's your mom, you need to take a call, please do that. Real life takes precedence over this game. Any questions on the open door policy? Okay. The next tool we're going to talk about is called lines and veils. This is a safety tool that was invented in the late aughts by game designer Ron Edwards for his game Sorcerer. With lines and veils, we're going to call out specific subjects that we either don't want to play with at all, or that we only want to play with under very limited circumstances. If a subject is lined, that means it's not going to happen in the game. I'm not going to introduce it as GM. You aren't going to, and you, the players, aren't going to introduce it as players. If I was running a published adventure and it included the subject, I would do my best to like edit around it so that that thing doesn't happen. It's just not going to be there. If a subject is veiled, that means we can acknowledge it happens. We may we may see signs or hear word of this sort of thing happening. We can acknowledge it happens, but we're not going to have any scenes that include that element. Anything, scenes dealing with a veiled eye, they're just, you know, it's not going to happen on camera. We're not going to have a scene about it. If a veiled subject comes up, we're going to fade to black or cut away or jump back later. Since then, there have been a couple of other things that have, there's been another category that people have introduced to Lines and Veils, which seems appropriate. That's the Ask First category. If you put something in Ask First, that means you're going to be okay with it in some circumstances and not okay with it in others. And before we introduce a subject that has an Ask First label on it, we're going to pause the game, step out of character, just have a little quick check-in to make sure, to make sure that it's okay to introduce that here. And if yes, we'll proceed. If no, we won't. We'll take another up. We'll go in another direction. Yeah, that's Lines and Veils in a nutshell. So we're going to discuss this a little bit. I'm going to pause the recording so we can discuss this offline without an actual record, so people are a little more free to speak. So and we will return once we're done with the discussion. Okay, we have set some Lines and Veils. The next safety tool I want to talk to is called the X card. So the X card is a reactive safety tool. If anything happens in this game that makes you uncomfortable in a bad way, you can invoke the X card. You can say X card. You can type it in the Zoom chat. If you're on camera, you can make like an X gesture with your arms, or you can say, "Hey, folks, can we talk about this?" That's also invoking the X card effectively. When you invoke the X card, you're telling the other players that we need to pause the game and have an out of character discussion. So you invoke the X card, play is paused. We're going to all step out of character and we're just going to have a discussion among players to know what we need to change. We don't need to know why, but we need to know what element isn't working for you. And that can be really anything. It's could be that someone's introduced a piece of fiction that you just don't think is really of the proper tone. Could be that someone has made a joke that you didn't necessarily find great and you don't want to really deal with that anymore. It could be that a character's has made an incorrect assumption about other thing that's going on. Could be something really really mundane, like I introduced an NPC and I gave them the name of the bully that used to beat you up when you were in eighth grade, and you absolutely hate that name. Invoke the X card, let us know what we need to change, and then we will make an appropriate change. I have on the Lines and Veils sheet, I have script change as another safety tool. I take a more informal approach to script change, but that just means that once we have paused the game, we're going to figure out what we need to do to take that element out and make the game fun for you again. Whether that's rewind the scene, replay it without that element or with a different element. Whether that means we're just going to cut here, jump to the next scene, and just take it from there. Whether that means we're going to slow things down and just go frame by frame just to make sure everything's cool before we get to a new point. We will figure that out as players. And ultimately, the person who invoked the X card is the one who gets the final say as to what is or is not acceptable in correcting things. I do want to mention you can use the X card to deal with things that are happening above the table. So you can invoke the X card to pause play if another player is regularly mispronouncing your name, is talking over you, telling you how to play your character. Hoping that doesn't necessarily happen, but if someone's regularly misgendering you, let's X card, let's deal with it, and then we'll move on. And finally, with the X card, if 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 something happened in the game that you're not feeling great about, for like, I don't want to really rock the boat, so I'll let it slide, and then it happens again, it is absolutely 100% okay to invoke the X card on an element that has already been introduced to the game. That you let slide once, but you don't want to deal with it again. Totally okay to X card it again. I think that concludes my safety talk. Does anyone have any questions on any of our on the X card specifically, or on any of the other safety elements we talked about?
I have a comment I'd like to make.
Please.
The first is, if you're going to X card, and I do encourage it, please say X card. Sometimes if I'm looking at the character keeper or something like that, I don't notice anybody doing anything. And so if you verbalize it, that'll be much more likely, at least for me, to pick it up.
Okay.
The
Awesome.
second thing is, like some of us, I'm on the spectrum. And especially on Zoom calls where, some of the nonverbal cues are absent. It's a little hard for me to tell when somebody else has stopped speaking, or when they're just pausing, as opposed to when they've stopped. And so, if if my conversation bumps into yours, just tell me to wait. I'll never take it amiss. And this is just a thing, that helps me in online calls like this, where you don't have the cues from people actually leaning forward around the table or whatever. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Brandon. That's really helpful to know. Okay, so if you do need to invoke the X card, let's actually say X card. And yeah, if there's like I said when I was talking about the X card, if there's anything that's happening in at the table, let's just pause the game, say X card, and we'll just bring things to everyone else's attention. Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that. This isn't exactly a safety thing, but this is where I would need to say that if something happens to me, and I'm gone for 10 minutes and don't say what was going on, whether that's, I suddenly cut out, or I take my headset, I look concernedly to my left and take my headset off and walk off camera without saying anything, and I'm not back for 10 minutes, assume something has happened, and take the rest of your evening. I'd like to say that has never happened, but every once in a while I get a power failure or I get an internet outage, and that if that happens, well, can't play a game over the internet if I don't have power or internet. Doesn't happen very often, but it does every once in a while. So again, if I'm gone for 10 minutes and I don't let you know what's going on through Discord or email or something, assume the game is over for the evening. I'll let you know what's going on as soon as I'm able. Okay. I think
In that same vein, I just want to let everyone know, I'm one of those people that's always on call 24/7. So if you see me looking away or not paying attention, I'm probably working. Something came up and I'm trying to deal with it or whatever. But I will always try to give my full attention. Just FYI.
Understood. Thanks, Vyrrk. Okay. Well, let's talk about Swords of the Serpentine. I guess if you want to on the case, so if you've all got the character keeper, oh yeah, that's right. Thanks. I just scrolled down. Two other things on the character keeper. Romance options and recording. We've already had an off before we started recording. I made sure that folks were cool with us recording, and it looks like people have said that they agree to recording. There is a romance options table, if folks could take a moment to take a look there. This isn't really a game that's focused on romance, but hey, you never know when that happens. When it might make role playing sense. So let us know if you can go to the romance table. let us know if you are interested in having like romance scenes between PCs or between your character and an NPC, and we'll make things appropriate.
I plan to actually romance everything, regardless of whether it makes sense or not.
There you go. I roll to seduce the dragon, says the D&D trope.
100%. Or the various statues that Eversink is filled with, or who knows. The lizard people that crawl up from below.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll definitely talk about the statues once we
Some of
once we
the
get.
statues slap really hard.
Well, they can. We will talk about the statues. Statues are actually really important in Eversink, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we deal with the when it talks about some setting information. So, I'm gonna click on the character creation tab. This is sort of like the general overview of how we're gonna like create characters. Before we actually do the character creation, I'm gonna give a little bit of talk. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what the factions of the city are, and just kind of like general overview of over like how the city works and like how our characters are going to do or how our characters are going to work. So there are a number of different play frameworks you can use with Swords of the Serpentine that are laid out in the book. And so as not to hit decision paralysis, I just kind of arbitrarily picked the one that I'm particularly excited about, and so I put that in the pitch. So the option we're gonna be playing is called Bookhounds of Eversink, where you are all employees of or hired by Imperator University in Eversink, um, and you have been tasked to track down and or recover rare and expensive and possibly magical books. So with that frame. When we go to make our characters, that's the kind of framework of the kind of stories that we're going to be that I'm interested in telling. So, you don't have to be a scholar. You could be someone who is, you could very well be a scholar, someone who is interested in the books to like learn from the books. You could be some kind of you know, you could have some talent into breaking into things and taking things that are, under lock and key. Presumably because the person who has them isn't supposed to have them, so you're going to steal it back. You could be like, you could, and when you got a bunch of, when you got a bunch of these sorts of people going around, sometimes you need a guy with a big sword to like keep them all safe. So you can really play any character archetype with this, but that's going to be the campaign framework. So a little bit about,
I apologize. What was the name of the university?
Imperator
Thank you.
University. Which is the primary. There are other schools in Eversink, but Imperator University is one that has been here for a few hundred years. Eversink has been around for like 1,000 years. This university has been around for about 100. For whatever reason, universities don't usually last more than a couple of hundred years. So the reason the city is called Eversink, it is built on an archipelago of islands in the mouth of the Serpentine River as it empties into the sea. In other words, it's built on a bunch of low islands that is essentially a festering swamp, or at least it was originally. Eversink has it's not subtropical, but it's also not fully temperate. It's a fairly warm climate. Um, and it's a fairly dense city. It's a very big city. It is Eversink is a city state, and it is one of the more powerful entities in the world. It, plays on the world stage. Um, it's a big cosmopolitan city. People come to Eversink from all over the world. It is a center of commerce. In fact, the patron deity of Eversink is Denari, the goddess of commerce. Um, the Church of Denarii is an official faction of the city. They are the city's tax collectors. Um, the holy book of the Church of Denarii is the is dinar is it's called the Book of Prayers and Tax Code. Um, and yeah, this is a city with this is a pretty hyper capitalist kind of place. It's all about making a buck. Um, in fact, it's the Church of Denarii thinks it's a sin to give things away for free. Um, so it's all about trade. It's all about commerce. There's a big central marketplace in the center of town, which is also near the biggest cathedral to Denari. And yeah, this is a very cosmopolitan place of commerce. And because there's a whole lot of commerce, there is a extensive criminal underworld. Um, why is the city called Eversink? Well, the reason is because everything in this city is literally sinking into the muck. Um, every building is slowly sinking a couple of centimeters a year into the muck to the point where, where you look at buildings, you can tell where they've, converted a window, a second story window into a door, because now that second story is now the first story. Um, and people just keep building on top of the buildings as they sink, which also means there is a very extensive undercity. There are lots and lots and lots of boarded up and bricked up dungeons and rooms and corridors that weave extensively under the city because the city is always sinking and they're constantly building on top. This has been happening for 1,000 years. People don't, and so hasn't hit bedrock yet. Is it for real? You know, is it magical? Nobody knows. But that's why the city is called Eversink, because it is forever sinking. Um, it is a city that is, that is, it's a canal city. There are some streets, but mostly the way people get around are through the canals, by canal gondolas and small boats and skiffs. It is a thriving port. There are several different port sections of, various echelons of, how financially successful they are and how seedy they are. There, there are many different districts. We can get into those a little bit. There are a bunch of different factions in play. I mentioned the Church of Denarii. Uh, there is a class of people who call themselves the ancient nobility. They were the original aristocracy. They're not really in power anymore, and many of them aren't nearly as rich as they once were. So, you have members of the ancient nobility who, live in a, who live in a, who live in a giant estate and who wear opulent clothes that are threadbare, that were the height of fashion 50 years ago, and who are eating and who are eating gruel out of gold plates. Um, the people who are mostly in charge now are the mercanti. They are the wealthy merchants and bankers, and they're the wealthy merchants and guild leaders and bankers. So they're the folks who hold most of the actual power these days. But the place is ruled by the Trixidane. The Triskidane are they're the actual governing council of Eversink, and the thing that's weird about them is people get tapped to join the Trixidane for a term of 7 years. Is it 13? Not really clear. It's also never clear who the Trixidane actually are. Membership is secret. They meet in secret, and you know there is a bureaucracy around the city that reports up to them. nobody ever really knows who the current members of the ruling council are, or how many of them there are. So it's all very mysterious. There's sorcery. There are sorceress cabals that constantly meet in secret to discuss magic and to do, you know, strange and creepy things. So those are the important factions. That's going to come into play a little bit because one thing that characters need to do as part of character creation uh, is to pick alliances and enemies with factions. So wanted to give a little bit of that. Want to talk a little bit about how magic works in this world. True to sword and sorcery games or sword and sorcery literature, magic is very powerful. Magic is also bad. Uh, when you cast a spell, you are channeling energies from somewhere else to affect the world. And anytime you do that, there is some level of blowback. That blowback is called corruption. In fact, the skill that powers magic is also called corruption. So you must have ranks in corruption if you want to cast spells. Your ranks in corruption are represent basically how much magical power you have access to. There's a skill called sorcery, and the sorcery tells you how well you are able to control that power. So you can have a high sorcery and low corruption, which means you don't have a lot of power, but you know how to use it really well. It's also possible to have high corruption and low sorcery, which means you got a lot of power at your disposal, but you can't control it. So the thing about casting true magic, when you cast true magic, you have to spend your corruption points, and doing so taints the world. When you cast a spell, you have to say whether you wish to externalize that corruption, and this is a side effect to whatever magical effect you're trying to cause. You can externalize that, which corrupts the world, or you can internalize it, which will physically corrupt your physical body. Why would you want to do the latter when you could do the former? Well, that's because causing corruption in Eversink is a very serious crime, like public execution serious level of crime. Externalized corruption physically taints the world. It causes an area, and how much it causes and how long it lasts depends on how much power you burned. But an area around where the spell took effect, if corruption has been externalized, an area around where the spell was cast, bad things happen. It attracts ghosts. It can cause general feelings of unease or cause feelings of nausea among the people who are there. You might hear whispers of things telling you to do things that you might not want to do in an area of corruption. Plants might wilt, milk might spoil. Animals might give birth to things. Corruption's bad, which is why some sorcerers choose to internalize it. Oh, well, one important thing about externalized corruption. Every sorcerer goes about their magic differently, and when they cause externalized corruption, it leaves an individually identifiable fingerprint. So if you've cast externalized corruption in many different points, someone with the skill called Spirit Sight can, one, tell the corruption was caused by sorcery, two, see the fingerprint. They don't necessarily know it was you, but if they see you do externalized corruption that has the same fingerprint, they're going to be able to put two and two together. And like I said, causing externalized corruption in the city of Eversink is a crime punishable by death. So you might want to internalize the corruption, which will slowly twist your body into something. If you've read the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser series, I'm blanking on the character's name, but the seven-eyed wizard who you never see his face because it's always cloaked. Yeah, assume he was a wizard that had internalized a whole lot of that corruption. And like what effects it takes is more or less up to you, but it's how it's going to affect you is kind of depends on like the nature of the spells you're casting and what your power source is. And we can talk about that if you decide to play a spellcaster. So I did want to make a note about that if you were thinking about playing a sorcerer. Sorcery is really fun, really kind of dangerous, and has some really interesting role-playing potential. Thank you. Ningobble of the Seven Eyes. Couldn't think of his name. It's been a while since I've read the Fat from the Grey Rouser series. Let's see. So I think it's probably enough background on the city of Eversink to allow you to make some intelligent choices. So if you want to click over to the Our Heroes tab, I've got 4 columns here. If folks would like to, there's a where did the player name go? Yeah, there's a player line. I think it's line 8. If you want to go ahead and like stick your name in there. So the first thing we want to figure out for character creation is to choose a profession, and there are 4 professions. There is the Sentinel. Sentinels are likely trained in the law and in the subtleties of detecting crime. You're also adept at knowing how crimes are connected. Many Sentinels are connected with the Church of Denari. Many Sentinels are connected with the City Watch. Many Sentinels are freelancers. But if you're a Sentinel, you know right from wrong. You can tell about crime. The primary, you're one of the things. Sort of like the key ability of a Sentinel would be Spirit Sight. Spirit Sight allows you to look beyond the veil and to like sense magical auras, sense spirits, talk with spirits. Ghosts are very real. Talk a little bit about ghosts. Um, Actually, let's talk about ghosts right now. So in the cosmology here, when someone dies, when someone dies in Eversink, it is of utmost importance for the family to erect a funerary statue commemorating the person who died. Because Denari needs to see the statue in order for your spirit to come to the Sacred Isle. If you don't have a funerary statue, your spirit's going to hang around as a ghost. Ghosts can be problematic. That also means that destroying an existing funerary statue is probably going to call that ghost back and is going to start haunting people again. So, so statues are important. Spirit sight allows you to see and generally communicate with ghosts, as well as see magical auras, see areas of corruption, and just see the fingerprint. Let's step back. So I think everyone said that they had played at least a little Gumshoe before.
I've
Uh,
never played it or
okay.
read it, just
Oh,
FYI.
okay. Cool. So, your characters are going to be defined by their skills, and there's or their abilities, and there's 2 kinds of abilities. There's the investigative abilities. That's kind of like the stuff that's kind of like what you know, and there's general abilities, and that is what you do. Um, So characters, we've got 4 players. With 4 players, that means characters are going to have 12 points of investigative build points to spend. That's kind of why it's important to have like to like do this as a group. So you've got 12 points to spend on all of these abilities. If you're investigating, so your character will have ranks in these abilities, however you choose. You can have up to 5 ranks in an ability. Nobody can have more than 5. If you have 5 ranks in an investigative ability, That means you are probably one of the best of that person, best. You're probably like the best, one of the best experts on that subject in the world. Very few people have 5 ranks, but if you do, you are literally one of the best. If you have any ranks in an investigative ability, and you're like, and this is sort of like the actual investigation angle of Gumshoe. If you have any ranks and you're looking for clues, or you're trying to follow like the plot line, um, if you have a rank in an appropriate ability, you're going to find the clue. Period. The end. There's no roll. Just that was how this game system dealt with the whole traditional role-playing game. Like, how do you find the clue if everyone blows their perception check and they don't find the letter that tells them where to go next that's hidden in the drawer? There's no roll. If you have the appropriate investigative ability, you're going to find the clue, you're going to find the lead, so you know where to go next. Um, you have a number of pool points to spend equal to the number of ranks you have in that ability. You can spend your pool points on an investigation to like learn more information. Like, okay, I find the clue. Like let's say I've like let's take the liar's tell ability. That basically allows you to tell that you can tell when someone's lying. If you've got a rank of liar's tell, and someone is like lying to your face, I will just tell you as the GM, oh, and this person is lying. That what he just said is absolutely not true. You just know. You could then, if you wanted to, spend a pool point of liar's tell to ask for more information, and then I would give you more information about that. Like, specifically what was he lying about? What was the implication that he was lying? I'd give you more context around the clue if you spend a point. That's standard Gumshoe. The other thing you can do in this game, specific to Swords of the Serpentine, is a lot of time, like when you're in combat, you can spend it if you can tell me how knowing an investigative ability would help you in combat. You can spend a point in combat or in an action scene to do something cool. That's often like boosting damage. Like if you've got like for example, if you've got the ability, I don't know, spot frailty, which allows you to see weaknesses in things. You could spend a pool point of spot frailty, like after a successful attack, to tell us like where the weak point is in this and how you took advantage of it to like get an extra die of damage. That's investigative abilities in a nutshell. I kind of threw a lot of info at you there. Do people have questions about how that works? Okay, so again, everyone's going to have 12 points to spend on investigative abilities. Um, there are four professions. There's the sentinel. They're basically like the detective. There's the sorcerer. That's someone who's cast in magic. There's the thief. It's kind of self-explanatory. And there is the warrior, also kind of self-explanatory. Each of those professions has 4 investigative abilities that are associated with it. In addition, there are a bunch of other investigative abilities that are kind of general. They're called social. Um, if you spend all of your investigative abilities in only one of those in only one of those professions plus social, um, you'll get an extra build point. Basically, that's a reward. That's an award to hyper specialization. You don't have to. You can you can buy investigative abilities in any of those categories. If you hover on the character keeper, if you hover over any of the investigative abilities, a note should pop up that'll tell you a little bit more, to give you a little more context over what that investigative ability like lets you do or lets you know. There's a couple of them that have some extra bonuses, and I'll just tell you right now. The City's Secrets. the city secrets, you can has that one has a special spend ability, which is you can spend an investigative you can spend a pool point of city secrets to just define a new city secret, and that is now canon for the city. So you can do that to, I recommend you do that to advantage. Like for example, um, in a game, the characters were like, trying to find, they were trying to chase someone, and they had lost their quarry, and it was at night on the night of a full moon, and a character who had city secret said, "Hey, I'm going to spend a point of city secrets to reveal a secret that I know, and that is on the night of the full moon in the harbor, horses can talk." I said, "Okay." So he spent that, and on the night of the full moon for the rest of the campaign, in view of the harbor, on the night of the full moon, horses can talk. So they asked a horse that was there where their quarry went, and it told them. So you can do stuff like that. Um, Similarly, Forgotten Lore is, I'm sorry, that wasn't City Secrets. That was a sorcerer who knew that from Forgotten Lore. City Secrets is things like, I'm going to spend a point of City Secrets to know that, you know, uh, this door has a secret passage behind it, and it leads to the city sewers. You can just define that, and bamf, it's true. So you can use that. You can use those kinds of spends to define things about the city, or to like define like new pieces of lore that are now canonical and that you can conceivably use later. It's fun to spend those like on the spot when it's when it'll give you an immediate advantage. Um, in general, when you spend your investigative pool points, they only refresh at the end of the adventure. Um, if things are taking a while, or like, the adventure isn't over, but a significant amount of time has passed, um, I, as the GM, may say that, okay, everyone can do a partial refresh, or like, okay, you can refresh four or six or three or something of your investigative pools, in which case you could restore. But generally, your investigative abilities, it's a limited resource over the course of the adventure, which may be multiple sessions. That's investigative abilities. Um, Questions? Okay, so that is opposed to general abilities. They work kind of similarly in that you have ranks in a general ability and you have pool points to spend. Generally, you're gonna have more ranks of general. For one, there's fewer abilities, and you're gonna have more build points to spend on them. Um, and you spend your general ability points to do things in action scenes. So for example, your combat abilities are also general abilities. So if you're in a fight, you can use your warfare ability to try to physically attack an opponent. And the way that works is, you roll it. I would generally tell you what target you need to roll. It's going to be 1d6 plus the number of points that you've spent on the roll versus a difficulty number. The standard number is 4. So if you don't spend any points, you need to beat or exceed that number. So you don't spend any points, and you need to hit a 4. It's basically going to be a 50-50 chance of success. You need to roll a 4, 5, or 6 on a d6. If I tell you that it's a 4 and you say, well, I'm going to spend 3 points, that's going to be an automatic success. Still going to roll, because if you exceed the threshold by 5 or more, you get a critical and something cool happens. But that's basically the action roll when you want to do something. You roll a d6 versus d6 plus the number of points you spent in the relevant ability versus a target number. It's usually 4. Sometimes it's 3 if it's particularly easy, or it could be higher if it's a particularly difficult task. Like if you're going to try to like break into like the most impregnable safe in the city. I might say, okay, well, the difficulty threshold to crack this safe is, I'm going to say it's 9, which means you're going to have to spend a bunch of points in order to, you can't hit a 9 on 1d6. You're going to have to spend some points. You can burn an investigative point, pull points to boost an action roll if you want to. If you burn an investigative point to affect a general ability roll, that's going to give you 3 points. That's going to give you a +3 bonus per point. That's probably not the best. That's probably not the best way to spend those points, but it's a possibility, and sometimes you got to do it. So you're going to start with 12 points to spend on investigative abilities. You're going to start with 30 points to spend on general abilities. So that includes both the standard and combat. One other thing about combat, there's 2 ways to defeat an opponent. You can hit their health by actually physically damaging them. You'd use warfare as the skill to attack their health, or you can try to demoralize someone, talk them out of it. Convince them that maybe this isn't such a good thing to do. That's called a sway attack, and it affects your opponent's morale. If your opponent's morale drops to 0, they're out. If their opponent's health drops to 0, they're out of the fight. They're out of the fight. They either got beat up too much, or if you want to say you killed them, you can say you killed them. If their morale gets to 0, they're going to surrender, or they're going to try to run. Either way, they're out of the fight. Player characters also have a health and morale score. Player characters' health and morale can go into negatives, and we'll talk about that once we actually get into a combat. Or if you want to hover over, it, it kind of breaks down the rules in the notes section. Sorcery. If you have at least 1 point of corruption, you may spend points on sorcery. Sorcery is how good you are at casting magic. If you are playing a sorcerer, you decide at the start whether your magic is going to affect opponents, or when you're using your spells to directly attack an opponent, you decide at start whether your magic affects their health or morale. And that's going to be true of all of your spells. Once you made that decision, you can't change it. So if you're primarily doing illusions, that's probably going to be a morale attack. If your magic is mostly about fire, that's probably going to be a health attack.
So do NPCs have pretty much even between morale and health?
It depends. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on the individual enemy. Talk a little bit about foes. Foes fall into basically 3 classes of opponents. There are mooks, which generally have 3 points each. There are lieutenants, which are tougher, and there are bosses. They are the main antagonist of either an adventure or certainly a scene. And mooks are designed such you should be able to a bunch if a dozen of them attack you, you should be able to defeat a dozen opponents without a whole lot of without a whole lot of trouble. Lieutenants are a little tougher, and bosses are they're the main antagonists, so they're probably going to hold their own against all 4 of you at once for some period of time. And yeah, mooks don't have a lot of health or morale. Lieutenants have a bit more, and bosses generally have a lot. I'll tell you right now, the way they design bosses is bosses generally have X number of points per part per per PC. Depending on the opponent, they may have a higher health score or a higher morale score, or they could be similar. Opponents will have a defense threshold. Generally, they have a health threshold and a morale threshold. That's the target number you need to hit to affect them. It's usually a 4. It might be a 3. Could be a 5, although that's rare. Usually your opponent's threshold is usually a 3 or a 4. For mooks, it's almost always going to be a 3, which means even if you don't throw any points into your attack, you're going to hit them 2/3 of the time. There are ways for one character to hit multiple opponents at once, and that is if you have more than 10 points in a combat ability, you have an ability to affect more than one opponent on a high roll on your attack. We could talk about that a little bit.
10 or 8?
8.
Eight.
Did
Okay.
I say 8?
It says 8 on
I'm
the
sorry.
paperwork.
Yep. I'm sorry. Yes, it is
Okay.
8. It is
Just
8.
making sure I understood.
Nope. Yeah, if you've 8 or more ranks, if you have 8 or more ranks in any general ability, you get an extra way to use that ability. I think the term in GUMSHOE is they call it a cherry. It's like it's a cherry on top. I don't know. You see that in some of the older books. I don't think Kevin Culp likes that term, so he just calls it an extra. So yeah, if you have at least 8 points of athletics, you gain access to the dodge maneuver. If you have anyway, so yeah, those standard abilities, they're pretty straightforward. Athletics is like running, jumping, leaping. Bind wounds is the general heal ability. Burglary is most of those most of the things that under the it's like the stuff that a thief would do. It's like pickpockets, open locks, sleight of hand, distraction, that sort of thing. Stealth is hiding and moving while not being seen. Preparedness is interesting. Preparedness is like having something it's like having something unusual. Like you have what you need when you need it. So this game doesn't really deal with equipment for the most part. Your character will have pieces of iconic equipment that you can rely on. But if you suddenly say you need something and you didn't think to have it, you can make a preparedness roll to see if you've got the thing. And at 8 ranks, with preparedness, you can like have a flashback. In other words, we can say that, oh, I knew that was going to happen. So 3 hours ago, I did this stuff, and then and then you can have like, well, I set this thing into place. So so when this character runs over the floorboards that I have previously weakened, they're going to like crash through the floor and fall and fall into the basement, something like that. Your character will have both a health and morale score. You're going to have 18 points to spend between the two. Break it up however you want. And your threshold of your health and morale threshold will be 3 unless you have at least 10 ranks. If you have 10 or more ranks, your threshold is 4. That's where I was thinking that's where I was getting the 10 from. I was thinking of that. So I threw a lot of information at you. So I think the next step would be to like figure out like, kind of like the high concept of your character and pick some abilities. I'm also looking at the time. We're about an hour and 15 minutes since we started. Why don't folks why don't we take a 10-minute break here? I also need to get some water because I've been talking a lot and my throat is getting dry. Let's come back at 5 minutes before the hour, and we'll pick it up from here.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Not really a priest, but gets his powers from a different source, a questionable source, as a sorcerer, which sounds kind of fun, or also a ex-noble, like duelist who's trying to make his way in the world again now that his family's lost power or whatever, and be as a fighter. So both those things sound fun to me, but I'm also happy to go other ways too.
Do other folks have character ideas?
I have 2 as well. One is a fighter who was basically a raider. Uh, I'm sure that Eversink, being a port town, has its extracurricular pirates, and who has settled down to a steadier paycheck. And the other who is so we're for the university, right? The
Yep.
And so the so I imagine that the university has the university has a library, and the library has someone which has the title of the master or mistress of books. And this person um, is the person they send out to persuade important people that they have to return things that they have borrowed.
I'm the library fine, pal.
Not exactly that, just, very persuasive diplomat kind of thing with a little bit of a scholar thrown in.
Oh, when you said persuade people, I thought you meant Conan the Librarian.
Yes, I knew that joke was coming. No, if you have to use violence, the argument's kind of been lost.
Or just beginning, depending on how you want to look at it.
Absolutely.
If you have resorted to violence and it's not working, it means you're not using enough. Adam, Elliot, do you have kind of general character concepts you're thinking about?
Yeah, I have a general character concept. I think I was kind of waiting to see what everyone else might pick. One of the ideas I was thinking about was a sort of freelance tax assessor who goes around finding wealth that people have not paid taxes on, and assessing the levying the appropriate fine for that. Um, so a sort of thief character.
Well, I haven't heard anyone mention embracing corruption and working with sorcery. Did I miss it?
Vyrrk, uh,
Is one of the options for me, but I'm not hardcore sold on anything. Feel free to pick whatever you like.
Yeah, well, I actually am pretty ambivalent. I'm happy to play almost any of these. I also didn't hear that someone was leaning strongly into Sentinel. Maybe I missed that.
no, no, they're not, and that would be a good thing to do.
Yep, Sentinel also sounds fun. So I'm
Or we have a classic tetrad then with
Yep.
Sentinel, a warrior, sorcerer, thief, right?
Yeah, and there's also and again, you can primarily be one, but you don't have to you don't have to limit. There is the there's like one of the profession options is the mixture where you kind of like play mix and match with a few things. Um, one classic thing that when you look at a number of the pre-generated characters that have been made for for various adventures, most of them usually stick to one, but there's always one guy that's like mostly a thief, but also has like a level of corruption because they can throw some spells, and also have like also have like one rank of like a rank or two of like a warrior ability like spot frailty or tactics of death. So they know a little bit, kind of jack of all trades. There's a
So,
go on.
I guess I'll take the warrior type. Um, that's okay with everyone else.
Sounds good to me. And I think I will be the corrupt priest then. It sounds like fun to me.
Love it.
So 12 points that we use
Yep.
in ranks on the social section,
You
or
have
not social,
that's
investigative.
all of the investigative abilities. You have a total of 12. You have a total of 12 points to spend in ranks. Those are called build points. Um, you can put a maximum of five. That means you are one of the most, if you have five, that means you are one of the most powerful people in the world in that. Um, Generally, a lot of time for gumshoe, I usually recommend like, pick one or two things that you want to have like, a few ranks in and then like everything else, like, maybe put a rank in. Because again, just having the rank means you're going to know stuff. Having a rank in any investigative ability means that you are much better than the average person in knowing how to do that. And yeah, you may only have one pool point to spend there, but sometimes that really comes in handy.
Am I correct that the corrupt priest is a sorcerer?
Yes,
Okay, got
correct.
it.
Ooh, 4 points of corruption. Haha.
Go big or go home. It's the way
Yeah.
I usually go.
And yeah, for every point of since we do have a sorcerer here, I'll talk a little bit about more on that. So for each point of corruption, well, for one thing, the first thing we need to do, you need to figure out is like, what was your source of corruption? Like, how is it that you have learned? Like, what is it that's giving you this magical information? Um, the two most common ways or I'm sorry, the three most common ways are like a demon, a small god, which the distinction between a demon and a small god is more nuanced than anything else. And the other way that some people gain sorcerer's powers is because they had been uh um I mean, everyone knows that the whole talk of like, the serpent people that live below in the undercity and that had used to live in this city before they got chased out in the humans. Everyone knows those are just bedtime stories that they tell to frighten children. But one common source of corruption is if you found tablets that were written by the serpent people that were inscribed with magic, every once in a while, one of the runes could literally crawl off the table and into your ear. And you're getting your powers directly from the Serpentine. So one thing I will say, if you do put all of your if you do only take ranks in one profession, you plus social, you do get an extra rank to spend.
Huh, cool. So I get 13. That's
Yeah.
fun.
So if you do that, you get 13. But if you want to mix and match, you're stuck to 12. Basically, like that gives you a little bit more, it gives you a little bit more to play with if you've limited your options. That came out of playtesting.
I like that.
I will say that when I was playing this in the playtest series, I played a professor of the university who was a sorcerer. She was a history professor and I took the Serpentine thing. She was like, reading these ancient texts and, you know, a a rune crawl, and that was the phrase we used. A rune crawled off the text and into her ear and whispered secrets to her. Um, so like when she was on those times where she did internalize corruption, she started slowly transforming into into one of the Serpentines. So, at the end she kind of looked like if you played D&D, in the end she was kind of looking like a Yuan Tai.
Nice. Uh, so and then general abilities,
In
you
general
said
abilities,
30?
general you have 30 points to spend in general abilities, and that
Okay,
includes combat abilities.
got it. Thank you.
Um, so for combat abilities, you do need, in general, you need at least one rank in order to do the thing. I don't, that's the official rule. I generally say you can do the thing if you don't have a rank in it, but you can't spend, you don't have any pool points to spend. You can't spend refresh points on it, and you have to roll 2 dice and take the lower. That's sort of my house rule on that.
Gotcha.
So even if you're a sorcerer, I would recommend that you put at least, I'd recommend that you put at least 1 point into warfare. Even if you weren't planning to fight, every once in a while you do have to draw your dagger and like take a swing at somebody. Probably not a bad idea to put at least 1 point in warfare.
Sorry, what's the difference between ranks and points?
So ranks is a static value. So when you have a rank in an ability, or you have some number of ranks in ability, that's like your base knowledge. Your number of ranks equals the number of pool points that you have to spend in that ability. So when you spend points, when you spend pool points in an investigative ability or in a general ability, it doesn't lower your rank. So like, if you've got 3
It's
points
the
in
size
liar,
of your pool.
it's the size of your pool. So if you've got 3 points in, say, liar's tell, that means you're really good at telling when someone's lying. Even if you've spent your 3 points, you still have 3 ranks in it. So, you still have the passive ability, even if you can't like active. Basically, you have to spend points to like, get extra stuff or to do extra things. The number of ranks tells you basically how good you are in general.
Then how do we know? I'm sorry, and I literally just explained this. And
Yep.
how do we know how many points go into the slot? Is it just
You
even?
yeah, you start with the number of points that are equal to your ranks, and as you
Got it.
spend them, that'll go
Okay.
down. So general ability points, your investigative points and your general points, they refresh at different rates. Um, your general ability points refresh when when you've had a chance to like catch your breath. Usually it's like at the end of an action scene, if you've had a chance to like, do a bit of a recuperation, like take 5, like have a drink, etc. All of your general ability points refresh.
Got it.
Your investigative points generally don't refresh until the end of the adventure. Although if it's a long adventure, or there's like time passing, or if the GM thinks that it would be, this is a good time to do a partial refresh, I might say, the GM can say like, okay, in this interlude, you can take, you can refresh 4 investigative ability points, or 6, or even, like, well, it's been enough time. You can refresh all your ranks. We're sort of like, we're kind of going into like, the adventure, the second phase of the adventure. And that's really going to depend on the nature of the adventure.
Do your health and morale come out of the general pool?
No, with health and morale, you have 18 points to spend between the two of them.
Okay. Sorcerer spheres.
Sorcerer's spheres. For every point of corruption, you know a sorcerer's sphere. That is a thing that your magic has dominion over. If you want
I
to, if you
understand. I
uh,
understand completely.
Yeah, so if you click over to the rules overview, if you click over to the rules overview tab, kind of like gives a little more information. And there's a section on sorcerer's spheres, and I listed the ones which were straight out of the book. If you could, but you can come up with other ones if any of those. So,
Perfect.
sorcerer's spheres are things like, blades, blood, lightning, uh, you know, animals specific, or like, you need to pick a specific animal, like birds or rats or serpents.
I'm with you.
Typically it's going to affect typically, you know, uh, and so when you choose, um, So when you choose your sorceress spheres, when you choose corruption, you have to pick whether your magic affects by default either morale or health. And that's true for all of your spells. That isn't broken down by sphere.
Got it.
So so if you're taking, so if you're taking things like, blood and death and fire, those seem pretty much like they'd be affecting someone's like, physical body. Whereas if you're taking things like, curses or secrets or music or love, that'd probably be affecting their morale. You can mix and match. It's just that, you might need to do a little bit of a stretch on how, if you most of your things are morale based, but you also have fire, you'd need to say, like how would, like, maybe you're not actually burning them, you're burning stuff around them or something like that.
Gotcha.
One other thing about casting magic. There are minor magical effects and there is true magic. You can cause a minor magical effect without spending corruption points. And the way I generally define those, this kind of varies a little bit. If you want to do something with magic that you could do normally, you generally, like without the use of magic, you generally don't need to spend a corruption point. So for example, if you wanted to, like if you were like in a cell and you had, I don't know, you had like the air sphere, you were like locked in a cell and you can see the keys hanging on a post, 20 feet away. You could use, if you had an appropriate source of sphere, you could tell us, or if you could tell me how one of your spheres were able to get the keys to you, whether that's, like lifting them up and floating them in the air to you, or, you call an animal in, that, you call in a rat. If you have rats, you call in a rat to, like, grab them and drag them across. You could conceivably get the keys if you had like a long enough stick and could grab that. So I wouldn't require a point of corruption spend in order to cause that magical effect. Likewise, if you're
But
in
if
the
I want to
bar,
make the key out of thin air, then that would be a
if you
different thing.
wanted,
Then you would take a corruption.
yes,
I
if you
gotcha.
wanted to conjure it out of thin air, or if you want to do like a big magical effect, like if you want to animate a statue to attack an opponent, if you want to like read somebody's mind, if you want to cause like, if you want to shoot a giant ball of fire that explodes, that's going to require a corruption point spent.
Okay.
Uh,
What? Sorry.
Go on. Oh, one other thing. Even though your spells affect one or the other, you can spend a corruption point to affect the thing that your spells don't normally. So if your spells normally affect, if your sorcery normally affects morale, you can spend a corruption point to cast a spell that affects health.
Okay. Uh, One more question for you. If my spells do morale, but I want to heal someone with leechcraft, is
That's
that
fine.
okay? Or do I
Yeah.
need to spend a corruption to do that?
So leechcraft is a separate ability.
Yep.
Um, there's the bind wounds ability. That's one other thing. If you have access to magic, you can use any of your general abilities and say
Hmm.
it's magic.
Okay.
Like for example, if you've got, I see you've got the stealth skill, the stealth skill. You can say, like, if I'm, like, if I want to sneak in there, you can say, you know, I cast a spell and I turn myself invisible without using magic. You're using your stealth skill, but you're like couching it in magic as a special effect. In that case, I wouldn't require you to do a corruption spend at all, since you weren't actually using, since mechanically you were using a non-magical ability that anyone could do. Um,
Perfect. It's
like I
exactly
had
what I
a
need.
Yeah, so like for example, I had a character who I was jamming a sorcerer who had taken the Shadows Sorceress Sphere and had, like, bought eight ranks of stealth. And the button for stealth is where'd you go? And that is, you could disappear and pop up wherever and wherever you want to go to. His magical effect was, I step into a shadow and I step into this shadow and I step out of that one that's over there.
Very cool.
So, it was stealth, but he was couching it, he was couching it as he use like putting a magical special effect around it. So you can totally do that. Like if you have an athletics check and you could say you could say you're doing a feat of acrobatics, or you can say that you're using magic to like lift yourself off the ground. So like it's like it's not like I need to get up to that roof rather than like taking a running jump and jumping. I can say I'm going to make an athletic spend to like float myself up there. You're not I'm not going to require I wouldn't require a corruption spend to do that if you're using a non-magical skill to do that. Make sense?
Sure. Yep. I gotcha.
So, with armor here, armor and grit, so under the health and morale, you have an armor or grit score. That's another defense. Armor subtracts its value from damage to health. Grit subtracts its value from damage to morale. Basically, everyone starts with one grit. There's ways to boost it, but everyone has one grit. Um, you know, Generally, you're going to have most people are going to be walking around with one armor, and you can define that however you want.
And I have two.
Okay. And if you want to have two armor, that is cool too. We'll talk about that when we get to gear.
I I fight with people for fun,
Absolutely. Oh, it
I figure probably I can take a punch pretty easy.
Nope, makes total sense. If you we'll talk about gear in a minute. Okay, so folks still working on their
Yes.
abilities. Okay, cool. Take your time. Said we're probably going to mostly do character creation tonight. And again, if you spend all of your points in one profession plus social and not in any of the other professions, you can get an extra point. One other thing I might recommend is taking a look at what choices other characters have made and maybe take abilities that other characters haven't taken, just so that as a party you have bases covered.
Okay.
Just toss. You don't have to. I'm just tossing that out there that it can make play a little easier if you've got, like if nobody has any points in intimidation, or nobody has any point, or like, nobody has any points in, like, I don't know, nobody has any points in charm. It might be a good idea that someone can do that, but that's again totally up to you.
It's a very interesting point buy system, actually.
Yeah, this is the traditional way GUMSHOE does it. One thing I really like about Swords of the Serpentine, I think Kevin Culp did a really good job here. Um, he limited the number of investigative abilities, because if you look at like Trail of Cthulhu has like 40 different separate investigative abilities.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. And they get really it might be 30, but it has a ridiculously large number of abilities. 4, 8, 12, 16. I think this game only has 24 total.
I
And
played in a. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, and in a lot of other GUMSHOE games, they also have way more general abilities. So one way that some of the games have gotten around it is another approach um, called investigative pools, and that is like all of the you have you don't choose specific skills. You choose skill pools, which have like 4 or 5
Hmm.
investigative abilities in there, and you have like a number of points for that pool that you can spend on any of them. I find that a little annoying. I played Trail of Cthulhu that used that option, and I don't know. I found it a little annoying. But yeah, Trail has way too many investigative abilities in my opinion.
Played Delta Green for the first time last game days, and I was flabbergasted by the amount of stuff that they could, like the amount of options. One of the skills was geology.
Was what?
Like
Was what?
geology. And I'm
Oh,
like,
really?
when are we going to have a geology test in a Delta Green game? I have questions.
Well, if you're trying to tell whether a particular bit of land is valuable because it has important minerals in it, of course.
I guess so.
Or whether this is some sort of antediluvian object included in some ancient Precambrian schist.
Ooh, maybe certain
Pretty
geological
true.
strata have chthonic entities in them more often than other ones.
Like fossilized Cathana entities. I like that.
Yeah.
No. Uh, should I do my drives now as well, or are we going to do that later?
I was gonna say it looks if yeah. So the next thing, yeah, let me hop over to character creation. So we've chosen professions. Yeah, the next thing we want to do is adjectives and drives. So if we go up to our heroes, yeah, if you want to describe a profession that your character may have, so like pick 3 to 5 adjectives that kind of describe your character. That can be their personality, that can be their look, that can be their attitude, just evocative things about your character. You can change these. This is sort of like your initial feel. And then what you want to do is pick 3 drives. Originally, these were called "What is the best in life?" Referring to the old Conan quote. Um, but these are just like 3 kind of like role-playing things that that are your 3 primary motivations on like things that you want to do. And these come into play in that once per scene, you can invoke your drive to basically give you a +1 on a roll. Just a free +1 on a roll. If your drive is coming into play, once per scene you can do one, and you can do it, and you can use each of your drives you can use each of your drives once in a session. Make sense?
Mhm.
Should we be purchasing allegiances? I forget.
We will get to that.
Are they out of our basic investigative build points or no?
No,
Okay, got it.
nope. You've got nope. With allegiances, you got 3 points total. You want to assign 2 points to allies and 1 point to an enemy. If you click over to the factions tab, that lists the 11 official factions that are detailed in the book. I'd recommend sticking to those just because I don't think we're going to be playing long enough to like really develop additional factions. Um, you can spend your 2 points. You can spend 2 points with the same faction, or you can do like 1 point each with 2 different factions. You can spend. Again. You have levels of you have allegiance levels, and you have pool points. So again, with factions, much like with investigative abilities, you can spend points with a faction to like get favors from them, or to declare that you've got an ally that knows stuff, or to convince them to like send you with a group of like send a group of guards with you, or convince them to lend you some equipment or that sort of thing. um, Also, because you have ranks, you will automatically get clues or information if it was relevant to a faction. Getting clues or information is the same with like enemies, or with allied or enemy factions. However, your ranks, your ranks with enemy factions, those are pool points that I get to spend against you. So I can spend,
Mm.
so I can decide to say, like, if you've got like, if you've got like, oh, and you can gain enemies like over the course of play, like, if you've got, so if you've got a rank of enemies in the Thieves Guild, I could say that, um, I could say that, well, there's, or if you've got enemies in the City Watch, I can say that, well, and that's when a bunch of guards show up to complicate your lives. So that kind of gives me some narrative positioning to say that, oh, well, your enemies are going to come in and do stuff. Make sense?
Mhm.
And the way I
I'm so
usually recommend that is for enemies, give them put a negative number in front of that so that we know that's an enemy. Or just say enemy colon. That also works. Nice. Oh, and the other thing, you can have allies and enemies be the same faction. That might indicate, there are like rivalries within the group, which I've never seen happen. I've never ever seen like, rival factions, like rival groups within the same faction. I've never seen that before in my life. Oh, and that should things should like switch out of gray if you once you put like a number in the level.
Oh, that's what happened. Okay. Sorry, I just broke all your logic.
Eh.
Um, is there anyone you would like us to put as friends or foes from the factions?
The Church of Denari is always a fun one to have as an ally or an enemy. Sorcerer's Cabals are always fun to have as one or the other. Um, the Mercanti are really good ones to have as friends. They're really annoying to have as enemies.
Mhm.
Um, take a look here. I find monstrosities to be kind of a weird one. But again, if you want to be connected to or like specific or like enemies with, the the monstrous factions, the like the non-humans that live in Eversink, whether they're the Ratican or the Serpentines themselves, or that can be interesting. I think the adventures I had in mind, they aren't necessarily going to come into play, but they might. Outlanders are an interesting one in that they don't have a lot of power, but they don't have a lot of power in the city. They may have power outside of the city and resources that they can bring in. And the Triskadane are they're the weird ones. They're the actual movers and shakers in town, but nobody knows exactly who they are, which can be fun from a role-playing perspective. Although having them as enemies could be very problematic.
I thought really hard about it.
But yeah, it is absolutely possible to have an enemy and an ally be the same faction.
Okay.
Let me hop over to character creation. So we've got people have chosen a profession. We've got an adjectives and drives. We've got an investigative. We got your allegiances. We got your general points. Got your health and morale. Your health and morale threshold is 3 each, unless either is 10, in which 10 or higher, in which it is case it is a 4. Our sorcerer has chosen whether their spells affect health and morale. And yeah, you've chosen your sorcerer's spheres: shadow, disease, fear, and blood. Ooh, that's super creepy.
I'm sorry, it's who I am.
Now my again, when I was playing in the playtest edition, my sorcerer, her spheres were serpents, because that was where she was getting her power from. Secrets, which got really interesting. Shadow, and it's one that's not in. It was one that was in the original playtest edition. It's not in this one, so we need to figure it out. But she had one called Dimensions,
Ooh, that's fun.
which allowed her to, like, change. Used it to change dimensions, and that got weird.
Also,
Weird in a fun way.
I have no idea if my spheres are even in that paperwork. These are the things that I wanted to do. And I was like, you said I could make them up. So that's what I did.
You absolutely can. Let me take a look. Let me just take a quick look. You had what were your spheres again? I'm looking at a different.
Shadow,
Yep.
disease, fear, and blood.
Those are all listed.
Look at
So
that. Great minds think
they're
alike.
all in the book.
which is good because, the apothecaries have trouble with reagents for the weird ones.
Exactly.
Exactly.
They have to send out for them and things like that.
Through mail order.
Okay, so the next thing, so I guess the next thing we want to talk about is gear. So this is not a game that concerns itself with, like, counting gold pieces, or this game does not concern itself with counting gold pieces. It has an abstract wealth system that we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, so your gear, like pick 5 or 6 pieces of iconic gear that your character has, and go ahead and write it down here. Um, this is not your equipment list. This is the stuff that, when your character is put on the cover. Imagine your character on the cover art of the novel. This is the stuff that your character is typically shown with. Does not These things, they don't have to be physical objects. I have seen people include gear as, like, um, a sprightly tune, a sprightly tune they constantly whistle, or you know, um, trying to think of some other examples. Perfectly coiffed hair. um, they also, you could also say that, you could also define that you've got a pet, like that, like that can be part of your gear. If we do have that, we'll need to put some parameters over, like, how much danger are they in. Um, there's a in there's a pre there, there's a set of pre-generated characters that Kevin Culp wrote, and one of them, there's like a foppish noble swordsman, and one of his items of gear is like my faithful manservant. I can never quite remember his name. Who is another one of the pre-gen characters, and the two of them basically have a Jeeves and Wooster relationship.
Okay. Am I stupid? How do I get to another line here? Like,
Um, oh yeah, yeah,
Control Enter.
it's Control Enter on a
Yep.
PC.
oh, okay.
I think it's
Thank you.
yeah, Control Enter gets you another line. And yeah, be as descriptive as you want to. You don't you shouldn't don't don't have armor. Have a have a have a have a have like silver filigreed bronze breastplate. Don't have a don't have boots. Uh, have like uh imported snakeskin boots with imported snakeskin boots with a turquoise buckle or something like that. If I can find those, I'll just give you some of the examples from the book. Page.
The other day I was playing in a game and I was making fun of the character keeper because I was like, why would someone possibly do this? This is just such a dumb way of doing it. And the guy started laughing. He's like, I made this character keeper, right? I was like, oh my God, I'm
Oops.
so sorry. He took it all in stride, but
Dare I
I
ask?
felt pretty bad about it.
Dare I ask the game?
Yeah, it was Eat the Reich.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just the way he had lined up the boxes, and it's Maddie who I know pretty well, so it was funny. Yeah, the way he put the box, I'm like, why did you put this box on this side? It should clearly be on the right side. 'Cause, but what are you gonna do?
I haven't seen a keeper for Eat the Reich that I like. On one of these days, I haven't run it yet, but I think when it's time to run it, I think I'm going to write my own.
I will remember. How many things are we supposed to put in our gear?
Five or six. Like they say, like five, like five or six. More if you want, less if you really get stuck, and you can come up with ones in play. Like what I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to find it. There were some pre-gen characters for. I guess it's not in the book. Must be in the supplemental materials. They had some pre-gen characters. I was gonna like pull that up and just kind of like read some of the. If I can find them, I want to read some of the like just to give you some idea of gear from the book. Let me see if I can find that. Here we are. Regenerated heroes. Okay, so this is for a So one of the pre-gens for the playtest edition, who was Kelsuka Longscream, barbarian heroine. She had a wickedly sharp obsidian sword kept sharp with blood,
Yeah.
leather armor and furs, a dead man's coin purse, now empty, a jug of good wine, also empty, curse the gods.
Fun.
Um, a sorcerer's mummified hand taken for luck, and memories of which enemy has screamed the longest. So that's the kind of stuff.
How is gear even intended to be used? Is it purely a narrative, or does it have any mechanical things?
It's mostly narrative. I mean, if you wanted to find that you've got like a big weapon, attacks. Most of the time, your attack is going to do d6 plus one damage. Um, if you've got a particularly interesting, like impressive weapon, we'll say it's like d6 plus two. So, like your warrior, if you wanted to find your, your, like say like your Corsair's your wickedly sharp Corsair's saber. We can say it's like D6 plus two. Or if you were using something that is, if you're using a weapon that is particularly, notably small, like, 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 pen, like my, you know, lucky pen knife I've had since a boy might only do D6 damage. Usually, but most attacks are going to do D6 plus one. But yeah, if you've got a particularly interesting weapon that it would make sense that, that if you're a warrior, we can say it does D6 plus two, in which case note it in your gear. Like one of the other pre-gen characters I'm just looking at, some of the this was a Sentinel character that had half-written letter to your mother you keep meaning to finish. Letter from your mother asking about grandchildren. And letter of commendation from your superiors. Dreams of rebelling you don't think you'll ever follow. So that's the kind of stuff. It's like it's like a mix of like it's a mix of standard stuff and stuff that just has like a certain amount of evocative meaning. Uh, the other thing is if you don't have most of your iconic gear, um, that can cause a bit of consternation. I think the rule is if you don't have a, if all of your iconic gear has been taken away from you, you might take you might actually take some morale damage, or possibly grit is lowered. I'd need to double check that. It's something like that. If you don't have your iconic gear, it's a problem. Okay, it looks like folks have picked their gear. Let me hop over to the character creation tab. Okay. So if you have defined any bit of armor at all, give yourself one armor. You know, that could even be, serviceable robes or a traveling cloak, or um, if you are wearing particular armor that you've described as, being like, like some kind of military armor, take two armor. But everyone should start with one grit.
So one grit and one armor,
Yep, one grit and one
or
armor, unless you have like a piece of like, unless you have a piece of notable armor, even if it's, even if you just say like, oh, I'm wearing a chainmail shirt, yeah, that'd be two armor.
but the watch notices things like that. Just saying.
Let's see here. Wealth. So, like I mentioned, this game has an abstract wealth system. Get into it a little bit. Um, at start, everyone is going to start with no wealth and no repute. So, repute is basically how well known you are and whether the knowledge of you is good or bad. That is generally related to how much money you have. Um, let me hop to the wealth section. I forgot to. I meant to put that into the rules summary and I forgot. So let me just hop over to the book here. Combat. Where is wealth? Here we are. Wealth. Uh, yeah, the intro paragraph to the wealth section of the book reads, Sword and sorcery novels are full of heroes who find vast treasure in one story and then are penniless again at the start of the next because they've squandered all their money on magnificent creature comforts. This game is aiming for the same feel. As a result, this isn't a game about buying and selling gear or about saving your loot to buy legendary weapons or increase your personal power in a fight. This is a game about increasing and leveraging your influence with other people. Spending your wealth opens doors. You can use that influence to further your own aims. So you'll gain levels in wealth. You start at 0 wealth, as it's assumed you've spent all your money to like what you spent it all wisely or squandered it on carousing, as heroes do. You can basically spend your wealth points to gain, to gain stuff. And so wealth 1 is enough so basically you spend your wealth between sessions. So 1 wealth is enough to live a life of squalor between adventures. Wealth 2 is enough to live a struggling lifestyle between adventures. Wealth 3 is enough to live a comfortable life between adventures. Wealth 4 is enough to live a wealthy life between adventures. And wealth 5 is enough to live an opulent life like a sultan between adventures.
That one's for me.
Um, there is it's absolutely a joke, but there is a system of coins in Eversync which is patterned on that bizarre like pre-decimalization set of coins in England, except it's even weirder. I'll post it if you want, but the bottom line is if you're counting coins, you're playing this game wrong.
It's one of the worst tables I've ever seen in a game. I know it's on purpose, but it was so wild.
Oh, it's wild. It is absolutely wild. And it's just there for flavor because you're not supposed to
So
use
good.
it. Um, so yeah, so spending wealth on stuff. I'm just going to read again. I'm going to just read some text from the book. So wealth points are most effective when channeled into lifestyle points. So, for example, in the night markets beneath Sag Harbor, you finally find a sorceress charm you've been hunting for, one guaranteed to turn any curse back onto the caster. And who cares if it's made with a hanged man's tongue anyway? Problem is, it's so rare that the preparedness test to acquire it is difficulty 16. You have preparedness 8, so the best result you could possibly achieve is a 14. So instead, you turn in 2 wealth for 6 pool points of preparedness. Now you have 14 points of preparedness to spend, so you hope to roll a 2 or higher on the die. So that's kind of how you spend wealth. Yeah, and how much money you spend between adventures on your lifestyle is what your repute will be at the start of the next adventure. So if you only spend 1 wealth on your lifestyle between adventures, you're going to start with low repute. Um, if you spend 5 wealth between adventures, you're going to spend with high repute 2. And having a high repute basically means uh, you know, it's almost like another investigative pool point that you can spend to like influence or gain or get favors from people. Whereas having low repute is something that the GM can use against you. So we're not going to deal with money. We're not going to deal with wealth now. That's the sort of thing we might get like over the course of an adventure. So yeah, so everyone should start at 0 wealth and 0 repute because and we're gonna start the adventure We're gonna start the first adventure kind of in medias res, almost like the opening of a James Bond movie. We're gonna be starting at more or less the conclusion of your previous adventure. We'll have an interlude, and then we'll really start play. So I don't think we're going to really have time tonight to start that, which is fine. I didn't think we would. But let's introduce our characters. Give us a little bit of, let us know who your character is, a little bit about them. Anything you want to like. Let's go. Let's go left to right in character keeper order. So Vyrrk, I think you're up first.
Okay. So we have Cab Reinhardt is my name, and I am a totally normal priest of Denari. Um, However, if you take more than a few minutes to like really look at him, you notice that his robes just aren't quite as bright as they should be. They're a little darker. The staff that he's holding has a tarnished icon on the top, not the normal bright silver that is of the or gold of the normal place. Um, and although he always has his hood up, if you do notice just right, he does seem to have like some kind of like tattoo on his forehead that you can't quite tell. Um, but he's very unassuming. He's calm, he's collected. He seems to be a just a really nice guy who's out to help the people, and he's always trying to heal the sick, and trying to do that kind of stuff. And that is his outward appearance. Um, who he, what he really is, and what he's trying to do is maybe a little bit more sinister, but overall, he's trying to do the right thing. Oh,
Awesome.
also,
Oh, go
uh,
on.
my allegiances I do have is Church of Denari, obviously. I have the Mercantile. Both of these are my positives. And then my negative is the Sorcerer's Cabal.
Okay.
Um, and I did notice that it looks like Lorenzo, who is Eliot, you have an ally of the Church of Denari as well. So maybe we could figure out some way where that connects us in some way. Okay, that's Cab.
Awesome. That's
Cool.
fantastic. Um, Brandon, would you tell us about your character?
Yes, Avanessa, um, known to a lot of people as Red, because of her bright red hair, which is and completely an Outlander trait, I am going to say, unless someone wants to contradict it. No, it's something you'd see of any even the diverse population of Eversink. Um, she is a tall woman who is cheerful and popular, and battle scarred. She looks like she's been in more fights than any 3 people you know, and has probably won most of them. Um, it She seems as appreciative to make a new friend as to do anything else. Clearly, she did something very martial for most of her life to this point. And if you scratch the surface, it's not hard to find out that she was probably a corsair. people who sailed out from Eversink to persuade merchants to part with their goods in certain fashions or another. Um, uh, she's the kind of person who is just popular with random people in the city. Among other things because she's pretty distinctive looking. And she just seems to have a lot of random friends, which is what, big charm score represents. And she has a little bit of acquaintance with a lot of things. She's really good in the scrap. Her equipment looks like it's been used a lot. A strange thing is about her is that she has a medallion which looks religious, but it's a starburst which does not conform exactly to any of the deities of Eversink. And if you ask her about it, she says she doesn't know what it means. And she has told the story that she has said to someone that a priestess on the Isle of the Goddess said that they recognized her, from elsewhere, which is not possible. And Evanessa wonders if it was her mother, who she is not sure whether she was ever in Eversink, or whether something weird is going on. She donates a lot of money to the Isle of the Goddess, just in case someday there's an answer there. And as most adventurers, often end up their adventure and to the next one without a whole lot of money in her pocket. With Evanessa, it's just as likely that she gave it away and that she spent it, on herself. She's not, averse to, to good food and drink and things like that. But past a certain point, it's a little highbrow for her taste. She doesn't deny it for anybody else. I think it's perfectly likely that, given that, so her allies are outlanders and commoners. And it's perfectly likely that she and Cab teamed up at some point against the sorcerer's cabals, since they both have them as enemies.
I like that.
Love it. Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. When we start play, we're going to assume that your characters like know each other and have been working together for some period of time. So so we're not gonna
Yeah.
we're not gonna have the like y'all meet in the bar and like meet up and whatnot. No,
Understood, but perhaps how we met the other two was, after Cab and I basically realized that we had it in for the same sorcerer. And we decided to join forces rather than get, killed separately.
Makes sense to me.
I like
cool.
it.
I like it. I like it a lot. These are very cool characters thus far. Adam, would you introduce us to your character, please?
Capitan Pangratian Marmagna. So I assume, given my allegiance with the ancient nobility, as well as my social investigative abilities with nobility, that he at least is from a minor family. And given that he is a sentinel and his levels in those abilities, I've invested only in those other than the social ones. I think he was formerly a member of some sort of civil authority. So captain could be an honorific, it could be self-assigned, it doesn't really matter. He's not paying attention to anyone else who cares anyways. So he is, I'm going to lean into the noble stereotype of somewhat self-involved and narcissistic, having chose a high command, or at least invested in command. So I take pleasure in ordering others around. But beyond that, he also has high ability both in the words, cutting words as well as cutting blades. So sway and warfare have been areas that I invested heavily in. He wants to prove his superiority and look good doing it. He's finely attired and would, I think, resist any attempt at slumming it, like trying to go in mufti or incognito. I think would be something that he would resist. I'm looking forward to him being ridiculous.
I love it. Fantastic. Fantastic. And Elliot, would you introduce us to your character, please?
I'm playing Lorenzo. Lorenzo is a thief by trade. He is a kind of Zelig-like character who passes unnoticed in most social situations, and so he is informing on the Thieves Guild to the Church of the Denari. He's informing on the Church of the Denari to the Thieves Guild, making sure that the gray market is still adhering by kind of the religious strictures of the church, and paying their appropriate tithes, and when they're not, serving as kind of a freelance tax assessor to make sure that any hidden wealth that people have stowed away is makes it to the appropriate pockets.
Fantastic. Well, this is a great cast of characters. They seem really appropriate to the genre. And I'm gonna just tell you that I think this is, and yeah, I think this is great. I think we're gonna end a little early tonight, just because I don't think we really have time to start. I will just tell you, I'll just give you a little prelude of our of how we're gonna start next time. You will be returning to Eversink on a ship, and we're gonna start the action as your ship is attacked by pirates.
Yay, pirates.
Maybe Red knows them.
I probably know some of them. I mean,
You
I'm
may.
still gonna,
We can we
still gonna
and we
try to kill them,
and we
but
can and we can absolutely figure that out next week. But I just wanted to let you know that you will be returning to Eversink from going to a nearby island nation where you were trying to track down a book. I will let you figure out like whether you were actually successful or not. It doesn't really matter because the adventure is going to go in a somewhat different direction. But yeah, that's going to be next week. If you have so next week we are going to be starting the adventure called Corpse Astray, which is the sample adventure from the Swords of the Serpentine core rulebook. It's a really good way to start this game, and it's kind of a teaching adventure that like deliberately has like a bunch of like going through a bunch of stuff that's typical of the game, and it's a really good adventure. So, and I've run it a few times, so that's what we're going to be looking at for next time. Normally at the end of a session, I like to do a little thing. I like to do a little debrief called Stars and Wishes. Didn't really get to play tonight, so I think I'm just gonna say thanks everyone for playing. And I'm looking forward to actually getting this game off the ground with this fascinating cast of characters. Same time next week.
Awesome. I'm looking
So,
forward to it.
yay.
awesome. So thanks. So,
Real
yes.
quick, Mike, if we all want, like, I don't know, if we want to talk about something or have questions or ask things or whatever to each other, is the best thing to use like this mustard channel thread that you created in whatever it is?
Uh, yeah, that's in the that's probably the best place to go. If not, if folks would rather do it somewhere else, I do have a private Discord channel that I hardly ever use. I could send links to that. But yeah, but this thread on the mustering point channel is probably fine
Okay.
if we want to talk about it there. Um, yeah, cool. That sounds good. Yeah, thanks everyone. We will see you all next week. I'm going to stop the recording here.